This may seem strange, but here goes. Question, what constitutes a collection? 1 pen, 10 pens, 100 pens, 1 ink, 10 inks, 100 inks. Are there any pens that you would consider as must-haves or the collection is incomplete? Am I overthinking this? LOL. Well, Joe, I think, I wouldn't say you're overthinking it. I wouldn't say you're underthinking it. I would just say you're thinking it. I think it's a really good question, which is why I took it, quite frankly. And it can be answered a lot of different ways. It sparked some interest in me because I was like, you know what actually does make something a collection? Because you can have a bunch of things, but does that make it a collection on its own? Or is it more about like the intentionality behind the acquisition of said things? So the truth is you could really justify and explain it a lot of different ways. But I looked up some definitions of it because every, good thing starts with a definition, right? I'm not giving like a wedding speech here, so I think it's okay to use a definition. Merriam-Webster says, a collection is a group of interesting or beautiful objects brought together in order to show or study them or as a hobby. So I think most of us would fall into more of this hobby category. And I looked it up on Wikipedia about collecting, and they actually have some really interesting stuff that was thought-provoking for me. So I wanted to share some of my thoughts. I sort of stay in line with what you asked. I deviate just a tad, but then I come back, I promise. So coming off of the DC Pen Show, I had a lot of thoughts and a lot of things where I saw this play out, especially this Wikipedia had this one portion where it really talked about like the psychology of collecting, which I thought was really fascinating. So I wanted to kind of pontificate on that for a minute. I'll quote some stuff verbatim from Wikipedia, which makes me a very credible source, of course, but what the heck, this is just a free YouTube video anyway, so I'm not a scientist or a researcher, so I'm giving myself liberty to say whatever I want. So starting off here, the hobby of collecting often goes hand in hand with an interest in the objects collected and what they represent. For this reason, collecting can have educational benefits, and some collectors even become experts in their field. Okay, I would say that, if I may be so bold, I probably fall into this category. A lot of the nature of my collecting pens has been to educate myself as a retailer, share them with you in videos, make better decisions about exclusives we should co-design or recommendations to manufacturers, because I have a collection that I can reference and use for educational purposes. So this is probably where I fall. And then whether I'm considered an expert or not, some may say yes, some may say no. But either way, I have a lot of pens, so I could be considered an expert by my collection. Another thought here, maintaining a collection can be a relaxing activity that counteracts the stress of life. While providing a purposeful pursuit which prevents boredom, the hobby can lead to social connections between people with similar interests and the development of new friendships. It has also been shown to be particularly common among academics. So I see this play out a lot, especially around fountain pens with people who have engage in a lot of mental activity in their jobs, especially like when I go to a pen show. I'm always curious, like, what type of person goes to a pen show? Besides me, like, obviously I'm a special scenario, and there are like the influencers, bloggers, vloggers, whatever you want to call them, who go to pen shows because it's very much of a social thing. But there are others too who go there because they have a collection and they are maybe scientists or IT professionals, engineers, academics, maybe like professors or some researchers or something like that. There are a lot of people who kind of fall into this category. Maybe they work in the area of medicine, something where you're using a lot of mental activity, and that kind of carries over. Maybe you're getting a break from your normal mental activity, but you still want to be mentally stimulated rather than just like binge watching, whatever, The Office on YouTube. on Netflix or something, which I definitely do from time to time. But people that go to these pen shows may go for the mental stimulation and maybe collect pens there. And I definitely see that playing out quite a bit. And then there's a heavy social element, like the development of new friendships through similar interests. That definitely happens in the pen world. You see this in meetups. You see this in even in online gatherings through, whatever it's Facebook groups like Goulet Nation or other pockets of the internet like on Instagram. People connect with each other based on the interests. Another thought here from Wikipedia: collecting for most people is a choice, but for some it can be a compulsion, sharing characteristics with obsessive hoarding. And it talks a little bit about OCD and stuff like that, and how it can even be hereditary and stuff that's passed on, through generations, can build upon that. I can't really comment on that. That's getting a little deep and a little judgy for me to make any assessments based on what I saw from the DC show. But I can certainly see that being something that would possibly be a factor for some people in the fountain pen world. Certainly there could be a compulsive aspect to it. And I have that a little bit myself. There's certainly some where I'm like, I've kind of made a decision on certain brands, like I want to collect all of the whatever, Lamy Safari, Twisby Ecos, whatever it might be, and I will go to more extensive lengths to get those things that are missing from the collection simply so that I can complete the collection. But for me, it doesn't come to an unhealthy degree, so I would not call it a disorder like OCD. But anyway, certainly that could be pontificated. Rachel may feel differently. It's been speculated that the widespread appeal of collecting is connected to the hunting and gathering that was once necessary for human survival. Collecting is also associated with memory by association and the need for the human brain to catalog and organize information and give meaning to one's actions. I thought this was really an interesting speculation coming from the internet, that in an age where we not many of us maybe are hunting or gathering as a means of survival. And then, having things that play out in terms of a hobby where hunting or gathering is an activity we can partake in voluntarily, it kind of gives an interesting, question to the psychological aspect of, are we wired like in our brains to hunt and gather? And so maybe we seek that out in our hobbies if we aren't getting that enough in our regular daily survival life. I don't know. I had never really thought about it like that, but it made me raise the question. Okay, so backing away from some of the deeper psychological aspects of collecting, I would say that basically if you're buying pens intentionally, simply beyond just meeting a utilitarian need, even one pen could be considered a collection. Now, there is no specific number that I was able to find in any definitions that I looked up of what makes something a collection. I think really what may constitute it is the intentionality behind it. I could make a strong argument that it's a group, so you'd have to have at least two things, because there's a lot of pluralism that's used in the definitions of collecting. So really, maybe technically, if we want to play it safe, you need two things to have a collection, because if you buy just one, it's not really a collection, it's just a thing. There you go. So they could be similar. They could be similar to brand, feature, color, or whatever, as long as it has some form of intentionality behind it. But honestly, I could say that fountain pens in and of themselves could be considered enough of a niche to be considered a collection. Sort of like if you get into stamps or coins or something else, postcards, whatever it may be, just that category of thing would make it a collection. So fountain pens, if you have two fountain pens, you could consider that to be a collection. I would say that's a pretty safe bet, especially for somebody who's not in the fountain pen world. If you showed them and you're like, hey, look, I have a few pens, they're like, oh, you have a fountain pen collection. But if you're deep into fountain pens, you're like, no, these are so completely different. This one's 5 1/4 inches long, and this other one is 5 1/2. They're basically completely different from each other. Or you're like, no, this one is teal and this other one is turquoise. It's so different, you don't even understand. Not to mention, this one's 35 grams and this one's under 30. That's not even close. So you can dissect it into subcategories as much as you want. I would say if you get to the point where you're splitting hairs like that, you have a collection. So getting back to your second part of your question there, must-haves, I think, becomes unbelievably subjective. Based on the nature of the collection aspect or even a sub-collection, it's probably going to vary based on what people feel. You know, there are some people who are really big into, say, like vintage pens, and it's like you can't have a vintage collection if you don't have a Parker 51, a Parker 75, a Schaefer, you know, whatever, Triumph or Snorkel or whatever it might be. Then like, how do you not even have these things, or you know, whatever it might be, Waterman 52 or something like that. Or if you have modern pens, if you don't have a Pilot Metropolitan, a Lamy Safari, a Platinum Preppy, a da-da-da-da-da-da, whatever, a TWSBI Eco, then like, what are you even doing? You don't have you know, whatever it is. I really don't hear that much of like, if you don't have this, then you're not legit, or anything like that, the collection or whatever. I really don't hear a lot of that happening in the pen world. So I don't think there's really any must-haves. I think there's a lot of nice-to-haves. Where I hear about must-haves is pretty much like a buzzword catchphrase, clickbait kind of thing you see on like listicles on YouTube or BuzzFeed or whatever it might be. So, you know, as I was kind of thinking through this question that you asked about must-haves, I was thinking like, oh, actually, you know, there's probably a good idea for creating some content for some of these subcategories, some sub-collections, if you will. You know, like, you know, 10 must-have fountain pens for newbies or lefties or, you know, whatever it is, artists or writers or something like that. There's probably a lot that we could do to like curate and put things together. So it's got my wheels turning a little bit. But no, I don't think there's anything like definitive. There's just some that's like are so good. You know, for like we have a video of fountain pens for students. Like you could definitely say there's like must-have pens for students, and whatever categorization that you use there, you know, you can kind of curate that. But that's 100% subjective. I personally consider myself somewhat more of an acquirer than a collector, because my methodology behind collecting has not been one of particular intentionality behind each piece that I get, other than it's actually kind of the opposite of most people. Most people are looking for slight differences but a common theme. Like, for example, if you're like, you know, I want to have every limited edition Pilot Vanishing Point, and you go and you methodically collect every single one, and you get each little variant, and you look for the, you know, maybe the retailer exclusives or the national exclusives that they've done, regional exclusives, whatever it may be, and then you have all of them beautifully in a tray, and it looks like a nice little rainbow or whatever. Me, I've actually gone kind of the opposite because of the nature of what I do. I want to have a lot of different experiences. I want to speak about how one nib compares to another, like, you know, in terms of changing different nib sizes or, you know, different filling mechanisms, all that. So I've actually gone the opposite of going the broadest, most different, you know, way that I can go in collecting a lot of different things. So my collection looks very diverse and very scattered, all different brands, all different sizes and weights and filling mechanisms and nib sizes and colors, because I want to be able to reference a lot of things. But there are certainly some that I like to be able to reference, you know, for when a Lamy Safari comes out. I have lots of previous special editions of Lamy Safaris I can compare to, but then I can also pull from random colors of random other pens and show what's going on. So that's been my personal, you know, approach, which is just very scattered and systematic in its scatteredness, if that makes sense. It's going to be different for everyone, but I think the bottom line is this is a hobby, this is a lifestyle perhaps for some of you, and it's just going to look different for everybody. So do whatever makes you happy.